With the possible exception of Matthew's account of the Great Commission in chapter 28, I dare say more mission messages have been preached on Matthew 9, verses 35 to 38 than any other portion of Scripture. Listen to these familiar words. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." Matthew tells us that when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them. I found myself asking the question not long ago, so why was he so compassionate? Well, the answer might seem obvious. After all, he was the Son of God. He was love incarnate. Why would he not be compassionate? But that wasn't a good enough answer for me that day. And so I began to look into the earlier portion of that chapter and the chapter before. And what I discovered, I think, was really significant. Let me trace Jesus' journey leading up to this portion, going back to the early verses of chapter 8. In the first few verses of chapter 8, we read that Jesus healed a leper. After healing the leper, he healed the centurion's servant. From there, he went to Peter's home, where he discovered Peter's mother-in-law sick with a fever, and so he healed her. Matthew tells us that while there, he healed many others. In the latter portion of chapter 8, Jesus delivers 2 demon-possessed men from the demons that had paralyzed them. Then in the opening verses of chapter 9, he healed a paralyzed man. After then calling Matthew, a tax collector, to follow him, Jesus heads to the home of the synagogue ruler whose daughter had died. But on the way there, he is met by a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years, and he heals her when she touched the hem of his garment, the healing on the way to a resurrection. He gets on to the synagogue ruler's home, raises the daughter from the dead, and then in the latter portion of the chapter, we find him healing two more blind men, plus delivering a man who was demon-possessed and as a result had been unable to speak. That's a pretty remarkable record in just 2 chapters. What struck me is that Jesus was so compassionate because he was so close to people. He allowed himself to be in a position where he was absolutely overwhelmed by the needs all around him. Now, there's a lot that I could say about this passage in these 2 brief chapters, but let me just make a few suggestions today regarding how we might develop a heart of compassion like Jesus. First of all, we need to get really close, up close and personal with needy people. Second, we need to ask God to help us to really see them, to see them as they really are. I'm reminded of a time a number of years ago when my wife was driving downtown Atlanta with our youngest son, who at the time was just 6 or 7 years old, to help serve lunch at Trinity's Soup Kitchen. On their way there, our youngest son, Joey, asked Pam why they were going to town. She said that they were going to be serving lunch to homeless people. He thought a minute and then looked at her and said, "But Mommy, homeless people need homes. They don't just need lunch." Interesting how a 6-year-old could really see people in a way that we adults sometimes might not. So ask God to help you really see needy people. Third, let your heart be broken by what you experience. Fourth, join Jesus in praying for workers. And fifth, be ready to be the answer to your own prayer.